I'm standing in my stepfather's study with a knife in my hand, watching him bleed out on his Persian rug, finally knowing the truth about what he did to my mother 20 years ago. The hidden letter in my trembling hand explains everything, and there's no going back now. Let me take you back to where this nightmare really began, 3 weeks ago, when I still believed the lie. I was cleaning out the attic of our family home in Charleston, South Carolina, preparing to sell it after my stepfather Marcus announced he was moving to Florida for retirement. Dust particles floated through the afternoon sunlight as I sorted through boxes of old photographs, tax documents, and forgotten memories. Marcus had raised me alone since I was 7 years old, always telling me the same story. My mother Rebecca had abandoned us both, run off with some man she met at a bar, leaving nothing behind but a note saying she wanted a different life. I grew up believing I wasn't enough to make her stay. I grew up with that wound, that question mark branded into my identity. Why wasn't I worth staying for? Marcus was the hero in my story, the man who stepped up, who took me in, who gave me stability when my biological father died in a car accident before I was even born and my mother supposedly threw me away. He worked double shifts at the factory, never missed a parent-teacher conference, taught me how to drive, walked me down the aisle at my wedding last year. He was everything. He was my whole world. And I loved him with the fierce loyalty of someone who believed they'd been saved. The attic was suffocating that Tuesday afternoon, the South Carolina heat making everything feel thick and heavy. I was about to take a break when I noticed a loose floorboard near the old chimney, the wood slightly raised compared to the others. Something made me pull at it. Curiosity, fate, or maybe my mother's ghost guiding my hands, I'll never know. Underneath, wrapped in a plastic bag that had yellowed with age, was a metal box. My hands shook as I pried it open. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to me in handwriting I didn't recognize but somehow felt familiar in my bones. The postmarks spanned from 1985 to 2005, all from the same place, Riverside Correctional Facility for Women, 2 hours north of Charleston. My mother had been in prison. Not living her best life with some new man. Not forgetting about me while sipping cocktails on a beach somewhere. Prison. And she'd been writing to me for 20 years. Letters I never received. Letters Marcus had hidden. Letters that told a story so different from the one I'd built my entire life around that I felt the foundation of my reality crack and crumble. I sat on that dusty attic floor and read every single one. My hands left fingerprints in the accumulated dust on each envelope as I tore them open, greedy for the truth I'd been denied. The first letter was dated 3 months after she supposedly abandoned me. "My darling Emma," it began, and I started crying immediately because no one had ever told me she called me that. "I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need you to know that I didn't leave you. I would never leave you. Marcus has done something terrible, and I'm paying the price for his crimes. They say I tried to kill him. They say I set our house on fire with him inside. Emma baby, I swear on your life I didn't do any of this. He framed me. He wanted me out of the way and he found the perfect solution. I'm fighting this with every breath in my body, fighting to get back to you, but the evidence he manufactured is everywhere. My fingerprints on the gasoline can, my threats allegedly overheard by his friends, my supposed mental instability documented by a psychiatrist I'd never even met." The letters continued, year after year. Her hopes slowly draining away like blood from a wound that wouldn't heal. She wrote about the trial, how Marcus testified against her with tears in his eyes, playing the role of the traumatized victim so perfectly the jury convicted her in less than 3 hours. She wrote about her lawyer, clearly incompetent or paid off, who barely mounted a defense. She wrote about her appeals, all denied. She wrote about watching the years pass from behind bars, imagining me growing up, wondering if I hated her, wondering if I even remembered her face. She wrote about her release in 2005, and this is where my blood turned to ice. She wrote about coming to find me, about Marcus meeting her at a diner on Highway 17, about him threatening her, telling her I believed she'd abandoned me and that if she ever tried to contact me he'd make sure I knew she was a convicted arsonist who tried to murder him. He told her I was happy, successful, about to graduate college, and that her presence would only destroy the life he'd built for me. He told her to disappear. And she did, because she loved me enough to stay away if it meant protecting my peace. The last letter was dated 2006. Emma, my sweet girl, this is my final letter to you. I've decided your stepfather is right. My presence in your life will only bring you pain and questions you don't need. You think I abandoned you, and maybe it's better that way than knowing your mother is a convict, even though I'm innocent. I'm leaving Charleston. I'm starting over somewhere far away. But know this, every single day of my life I think of you. I love you more than air, more than freedom, more than truth. You are the reason I survived 20 years in that place. You are everything. If someday you find these letters, if someday you learn the truth, please know that I never stopped being your mother. Not for one single second. I love you forever, Mom. I don't know how long I sat there in that attic, holding those letters, feeling my entire past rearrange itself into a new shape, ugly and venomous. Everything I knew was a lie. The man who raised me was a monster. The mother I'd resented my entire life was a victim, and I'd been his accomplice in her torture, living proof that his crime had worked perfectly. He'd stolen 20 years from her. He'd stolen her from me. He'd stolen my childhood, my truth, my right to know my own mother. And he'd done it all while playing the martyr, the noble stepfather who took in an abandoned child. Rage is too small a word for what I felt. It was something geological, tectonic, like continents colliding inside my chest. I wanted to scream until my throat bled. I wanted to burn the world down. I wanted him to hurt the way he'd made her hurt, the way he'd made me hurt without even knowing I was hurting. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry anymore. I carefully put every letter back in the box, hid it under my jacket, and walked down from the attic with a smile on my face. Because I knew something he didn't, I knew the truth. And I was going to use it to destroy him. That night, I went home to my apartment and told my husband Tyler I wasn't feeling well, that I needed some time alone to process selling the family home. He believed me because he always believed me. That's the kind of man he is, trusting and kind. I felt guilty lying to him, but I couldn't involve him in what I was about to do. I couldn't risk him trying to stop me, or worse, becoming an accessory to the plan forming in my mind like a dark star, dense and inescapable. I started researching. I found the trial records online, public information that I'd never thought to look for because why would I? The daughter of a woman who abandoned her doesn't usually go digging into court cases. But there it was, State versus Rebecca Chen, arson and attempted murder. I read Marcus's testimony. His statement about waking up to smoke, barely escaping with his life, finding the gasoline can with her fingerprints. I read the character witnesses he'd gathered, friends who testified that my mother was unstable, jealous, violent. I read the psychiatrist's evaluation declaring her a danger to herself and others. It was a masterpiece of deception, airtight and thorough. He'd thought of everything. But he'd made one mistake. He'd kept the letters. Maybe it was arrogance, keeping trophies of his victory. Maybe he'd forgotten about them over the years. Hidden in that attic space he probably never accessed. Or maybe some small part of him felt guilty and couldn't quite destroy that last evidence of her love for me. Whatever the reason, that mistake was going to cost him everything. I hired a private investigator, a woman named Diana Flores who specialized in cold cases and wrongful convictions. I gave her copies of the letters, the trial records, and everything I could find about Marcus's life in 1984, the year before the fire. Find me proof, I told her. Find me something that shows he lied. She looked at me with these sharp brown eyes and asked, "What are you planning to do with this information if I find it?" I should have lied, but I was tired of lies, so I told her the truth. I'm going to make him confess. I'm going to make him pay. She was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Give me 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks were torture. I had to keep pretending everything was normal, helping Marcus pack, listening to him reminisce about raising me, accepting his hugs while my skin crawled with the knowledge of what he'd done. He talked about moving to Florida, about finally relaxing after all these years of hard work, about how proud he was of the woman I'd become. Every word was acid in my ears. I wanted to grab him by the throat and scream the truth at him, but I waited. Revenge, real revenge, requires patience. Diana called me on a Thursday morning. "I found something," she said, and I could hear the excitement in her voice. "Marcus had a girlfriend before your mother, a woman named Patricia Hughes. They broke up 6 months before he married your mother, and it was ugly. I tracked her down. She's living in Asheville now, running a bookstore. She'll talk to you. She says she always knew he was dangerous." I drove to Asheville the next day, told Marcus I was going to visit a college friend. Patricia was 60 now, gray hair cut short, wearing reading glasses on a chain around her neck. We sat in the back of her bookstore with coffee, and she told me everything. Marcus had been obsessed with control, she said. He'd isolated her from her friends, monitored her phone calls, accused her of cheating constantly. When she finally left him, he'd threatened to kill her, told her he'd make it look like an accident, that no one would ever suspect him because he was so good at playing the nice guy. She'd gotten a restraining order, moved away, and never looked back. "When I heard he'd married someone new," Patricia said, "I was terrified for her. When I heard about the fire and her conviction, I knew. I knew he'd done it. But I was a coward. I didn't come forward because I was still afraid of him. Sorry. I wasn't angry at her. Fear makes cowards of us all. But now I had a witness, someone who could testify to his capacity for violence, his history of threats." Diana kept digging. She found irregularities in the fire investigation, evidence that the lead investigator had been Marcus's fishing buddy, expenses covered by Marcus in the months following the trial that suggested he'd paid people off. She found the psychiatrist who'd evaluated my mother, now retired and dying of cancer, willing to admit he'd been paid to write a damning report without doing a proper evaluation because he'd been drowning in gambling debts. She found everything. The whole house of cards was right there, waiting to collapse. But here's the thing, and this is the moment that changed everything for me, the moment that made me realize how far I was willing to go. I didn't take this evidence to the police. I didn't hire a lawyer to get my mother's conviction overturned. I didn't seek justice through the system that had already failed her once. Because the system would give him a trial, due process, maybe prison if we were lucky. And that wasn't enough. Not for 20 years of her life. Not for 20 years of mine, built on his lies. Not for the fact that my mother died alone in 2019, I discovered from a death certificate Diana found. From cancer she couldn't afford to treat properly because she'd been working minimum wage jobs under the table, too ashamed of her record to build a real life. She died alone, believing I hated her. Believing I thought she'd abandoned me. And he'd let me go to her funeral, never held, never knowing she was my mother. Have you ever discovered something so devastating that it rewrites your entire understanding of your life, making you question every memory, every decision, every moment of happiness because it was all built on a foundation of lies? I sat in my car outside Patricia's bookstore after our meeting, and I made my decision. I was going to make him confess. I was going to make him feel every ounce of pain he'd inflicted. And then I was going to decide whether he deserved to live with that knowledge or whether the world was better off without him in it. It's a terrible thing, realizing you're capable of murder. But it's even more terrible realizing you're willing to do it, that you've already started planning it, that some part of you wants to do it. I spent the next week preparing. I copied all the evidence, stored it in multiple locations, gave copies to Diana with instructions to send them to the police if anything happened to me. I wrote a letter to Tyler explaining everything, telling him I loved him and that I was sorry for what I was about to do. I put it in a safety deposit box with instructions for it to be opened if I was arrested or died. Then I invited Marcus to dinner at the family home, told him I wanted one last meal there before we sold it, just the two of us, a celebration of our relationship and all he'd done for me. He was so happy. He actually cried, told me I was the best thing that ever happened to him. I smiled and hugged him and felt absolutely nothing but cold determination. The night came. I cooked his favorite meal, pot roast with potatoes and carrots, the same meal he'd made for me every birthday growing up. We ate at the dining room table where we'd shared thousands of meals, where he'd helped me with homework, where we'd talked about my day, where I'd believed I was lucky to have him. After dinner, I poured him a whiskey, his usual nightcap. "Let's go to your study," I said. "I want to talk to you about something." We went to his study, that wood-paneled room filled with his books and accomplishments. His degrees on the wall, photographs of us throughout the years, me as a child on his shoulders, me graduating high school, me in my wedding dress with him beaming beside me. He sat in his leather chair, comfortable and unsuspecting. I sat across from him and pulled out the box of letters. I watched the color drain from his face. "Emma," he started, but I held up my hand. "Don't," I said. "Don't say anything yet. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. You're going to sit there and listen to me read some of these letters. Then you're going to tell me the truth about what you did to my mother. All of it. And I'm going to record it. And then we're going to talk about what comes next." "You don't understand," he said, and his voice was shaking. "I can explain." "No," I said, and I was surprised by how calm I sounded, how cold. "You can't explain 20 years of lies. You can't explain stealing my mother from me. You can't explain letting me grow up thinking I wasn't worth loving when all along she was in prison for a crime you committed. You can't explain that. But you can confess. So that's what you're going to do." I started reading the letters out loud, one after another, watching him flinch at every word, every expression of my mother's love, every description of her suffering. When I finished, I looked at him and said, "Tell me why." And he did. Because narcissists can never resist explaining themselves, justifying themselves, making you understand their reasoning. He told me he'd been in love with my mother, obsessively in love, but she'd been pulling away, talking about leaving him, saying she'd made a mistake marrying him so quickly after my father died. He'd panicked. He couldn't lose control of his life, couldn't be the man who got left. So he'd planned it meticulously, the fire set to look like arson, the evidence planted, the witnesses paid or manipulated. He'd testified against her with real tears because he actually believed he was the victim, that she'd forced him to do this by threatening to leave. He'd convinced himself it was self-defense, defense of his ego, his image, his need to be the good guy in his own story. "I gave you a good life," he said, and he actually sounded indignant, like I owed him gratitude. "I raised you well. I loved you. That counts for something." "You loved me," I repeated, and I started laughing, this horrible sound that didn't sound like me at all. "You loved me so much you let me believe my mother abandoned me. You loved me so much you stole 20 years of letters from her. You loved me so much you let her die alone, thinking I hated her. That's not love, Marcus. That's possession. That's control. That's evil." He stood up then, angry now, the mask finally slipping. "She would have left me," he shouted. "She would have taken you away. I did what I had to do to keep my family together." "She wasn't yours to keep," I said, and I stood up too. "I wasn't yours to keep. You didn't save me. You destroyed us both." That's when I pulled out the knife I'd hidden in my jacket pocket, a kitchen knife from the drawer downstairs, the same set he'd bought when we moved into this house. His eyes went wide. "Emma, don't do something you'll regret." "Regret?" said. "The only thing I regret is not knowing the truth sooner. The only thing I regret is every hug I gave you, every time I said I loved you, every year I wasted thinking you were my hero when you were my villain. I want to tell you I didn't do it, that I found some humanity at the last second, that I called the police and let justice handle it. But I'd be lying, and I'm done with lies." I stabbed him. Not once, not quickly. I wanted him to feel it, to understand on a physical level what he'd done to my mother spiritually, emotionally. I wanted him to die knowing that I knew, that his perfect crime had unraveled, that he'd lost everything. He fell back into his chair, bleeding, looking at me with shock and betrayal, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no horror, just emptiness. "You took everything from me," I told him as he died. "My mother, my truth, my past. So I'm taking your future. Or even now." I watched him bleed out on his Persian rug, the one he'd bought to celebrate my college graduation. Took longer than I expected, or maybe time just moved differently in those moments. When he finally stopped breathing, I called Diana. "It's done," I said. "Come get me." She arrived 40 minutes later with her brother, who apparently specialized in crime scene cleanup, family business. They asked me if I was sure about this, if I wanted to go through with covering it up. Said yes. They worked while I sat on the front porch, numb and distant. They made it look like a robbery gone wrong, a break-in, Marcus surprising the intruder. They took his wallet, his watch, broke a window. They were professionals. When they were done, Diana drove me home. "The evidence about your mother," she said. "I'll mail it to the district attorney anonymously. Her name will be cleared." "That's what you wanted, right?" He nodded. "That was part of what I wanted. Vindication for my mother, even though she was dead and would never know it. But the other part, the dark part, the part that wanted blood, that was just for me. That was my inheritance from him. The understanding that sometimes love and rage are the same thing, that sometimes the only justice available is the kind you take with your own hands." The police investigated Marcus's death. They bought the robbery story. I played the grieving daughter perfectly because I'd learned from the best. Marcus had taught me how to lie convincingly, how to make people believe what you wanted them to believe. At his funeral, I cried real tears, not for him, but for the father I'd thought he was, the fantasy I'd lost. Tyler held me, not knowing that his wife had become a murderer. The guilt about lying to him eats at me every day, but I can't tell him. I can't risk losing him too. 6 months later, the district attorney's office announced they were reopening my mother's case based on new evidence. The announcement made local news. They exonerated her posthumously, admitted the original investigation was flawed, that she'd been wrongfully convicted. They didn't have enough to charge anyone else. Marcus was dead and most of the witnesses were dead or had dementia, but her name was cleared. I went to her grave for the first time, finally knowing it was hers. I put flowers on it and told her I was sorry, that I loved her, that I knew the truth now. I told her I'd made him pay. I don't know if she would have wanted that, if she would have approved of what I did. But I did it anyway because I needed to, because some debts can only be paid in blood. I think about Marcus every day. Not with regret exactly, but with a kind of sad understanding. He was a small man who needed to feel big, who needed to control everything around him because inside he was terrified of being insignificant. He destroyed my mother not out of hatred but out of weakness, and somehow that makes it worse. If he'd been a monster, it would be easier to accept. But he was just a broken person who broke other people to feel whole, and he raised me to be grateful for it. That's the real crime, making me complicit in my own destruction, making me love my jailer. I've started therapy, told my therapist a carefully edited version of my trauma, discovering my mother was wrongfully imprisoned, that the man who raised me had lied to me my whole life. She talks about forgiveness, about healing, about moving forward. I nod and take notes and don't tell her that I've already moved forward, that I've already found my version of healing, that forgiveness isn't always possible or even desirable. Some wounds are meant to scar. Some truths are meant to change you fundamentally. Some actions can't be undone and shouldn't be regretted. Tyler and I are trying to have a baby. He doesn't know why I cry sometimes when we talk about it, why I'm terrified of becoming a mother. I'm afraid I'll be like Marcus, loving but destructive, protecting but suffocating. I'm afraid I'll be like my mother, too good for this world, destroyed by someone else's selfishness. I'm afraid I'll be like me, capable of murder when pushed far enough. But I want to try. I want to be better than all of them. I want to break the cycle. I want to love someone without conditions, without lies, without the poison that infected my family for generations. Sometimes I dream about my mother. In the dreams, she's young, the age she was in the few photographs I have of her from before the fire. She's holding me, and I'm 7 again, and she's telling me she loves me, that she'll never leave me. Then I wake up, and I remember she did leave me, not by choice, but she's gone just the same. Marcus took her from me twice. Once when I was 7, and again when he made her stay away after her release. I took everything from him in return, his life, his reputation when the truth came out about what he'd done. His place in my memory as anything other than a villain. Should feel like justice. Most days it does. But some days, late at night when I can't sleep, I wonder if I've become exactly what he was, someone willing to destroy another person to feel whole again. The truth is complicated. The truth is I loved him and I killed him, and both things are real. The truth is my mother was innocent and she's still dead, and clearing her name doesn't bring her back. The truth is I don't regret what I did, but I'm not proud of it either. The truth is I'm a murderer who got away with it, and I'm telling you this story because I need someone to know, even if it's anonymously, even if you're strangers who will judge me or understand me or forget me as soon as you finish reading. I need someone to know that this happened, that I existed in this moment, that my mother existed and loved me and suffered for nothing, that Marcus existed and destroyed lives and paid for it. I don't know if I'm a good person or a bad person anymore. Maybe I'm just a person, complicated and broken, and doing my best with the hand I was dealt. Maybe we're all capable of terrible things under the right circumstances. Maybe love and hate are closer than we want to admit. Maybe justice and revenge are just different words for the same thing. I don't have answers. I just have my story, and now you have it too. The box of letters sits in my closet now, hidden behind my winter coats. Sometimes I take them out and read them, connecting with a mother I never really knew, understanding her love and her sacrifice and her strength. Sometimes I imagine what my life would have been like if Marcus had never framed her, if she'd been there to raise me, if I'd grown up knowing I was loved unconditionally. Sometimes I imagine confronting him differently, turning him in to the police, letting the system handle it. But those are fantasies, alternate realities that don't exist. In this reality, I'm a woman who murdered her stepfather and hid it perfectly. In this reality, I have to live with that forever. In this reality, that's my truth. I'm sharing this because I need you to understand something important. Evil doesn't always look like evil. Marcus wasn't a cartoon villain. He was a regular man who made terrible choices and rationalized them brilliantly. He went to church. He donated to charity. He was kind to waitresses and tipped well. He helped his neighbors and volunteered at the food bank. And he framed an innocent woman for attempted murder and stole her child and never lost a night of sleep over it. Evil is ordinary. Evil is the person sitting next to you who you'd never suspect. Evil is the ability to hurt people and tell yourself you're the hero. I look at Tyler sometimes, my kind, trusting husband, and I wonder what he'd do if he knew. Would he turn me in? Would he leave me? Would he understand that I did what I felt I had to do, that I was drowning in rage and betrayal and the only way to breathe again was to make Marcus stop breathing? I'll never know because I'll never tell him. That's another lie I'll carry. Another secret that makes me more like Marcus than I want to admit. We're all liars in the end. We all have truths we hide to protect ourselves or the people we love. The only difference is scale. My mother's gravestone has been updated. It used to say just her name and dates. Now it says, "Beloved mother, wrongfully convicted, finally free." I paid for the new stone, used Marcus's life insurance money to do it. There's a poetry to that. Using his money to honor the woman he destroyed. I visit her grave every Sunday now. Tell her about my week, about Tyler, about my plans for the future. I tell her I'm sorry I didn't know, that I didn't look for her, that I believed the lie for so long. I tell her I love her. I tell her I made him pay. I don't know if she can hear me, if there's anything after death, if she knows what I did for her. But I need to believe she does. I need to believe she understands. There's a weight to carrying a secret this big. It's physical, pressing down on my chest every morning when I wake up, sitting in my stomach during every conversation, hovering over me like a storm cloud that never breaks. I'm constantly aware of it, constantly monitoring my words and expressions to make sure I don't slip, don't reveal anything. It's exhausting, but it's also clarifying. I understand now why Marcus kept those letters instead of destroying them. Secrets are heavy, but they're also power. They're evidence of your capacity to do hard things, survive hard things, hide hard things. They make you feel dangerous and alive. I wonder sometimes if I'll ever tell anyone the whole truth. Not this anonymous confession, but a real confession to a real person who knows my face and my name. I imagine sitting across from Tyler 20 years from now, when we're old and our lives are mostly behind us, and telling him everything. I imagine his face, the shock and hurt and betrayal. I imagine him asking me how I could do it, how I could lie to him for decades. I imagine telling him the same thing I'm telling you now, that love isn't simple, that justice isn't clean, that I did what I thought I had to do and I don't know if it was right, but it's done and I can't undo it. I imagine him leaving me or staying with me, and I honestly don't know which would be worse, losing him or keeping him under false pretenses. The truth is a weapon. Marcus used it against my mother, twisting facts into lies, lies into convictions. I used it against him, uncovering his secrets and forcing him to face them before he died. Now I'm wielding it here, giving it to you, strangers on the internet who can't hurt me because you don't know who I am. The truth sets you free, people say, but that's not quite right. The truth binds you to your actions, forces you to own them, makes you responsible for the consequences. The truth doesn't set you free. The truth makes you accountable. And maybe that's better, maybe that's what we all need, to be held accountable for the things we do in darkness, even if it's only by ourselves. I'm 29 years old. I've been married for 2 years. I have a good job, good friends, a good life by most measures. I'm also a murderer. Both things are true. I contain multitudes, as we all do. I'm capable of love and hate, creation and destruction, truth and lies. I'm human, complicated and flawed, and trying to navigate a world that doesn't have clear answers for the big questions. What do you do when the person who hurt you is also the person who raised you? What do you do when the system fails and leaves you alone with your rage? What do you do when love and violence feel like the same thing? I don't have answers. I only have choices I've made, consequences I'm living with, and a story I needed to tell. I needed someone to know that my mother existed, that she loved me, that she was innocent, that she suffered for nothing. I needed someone to know that Marcus existed, that he destroyed lives, that he paid for it finally, even if the payment came from me instead of the law. I needed someone to know that I exist in this weird liminal space between victim and perpetrator, between justified and guilty, between peace and torment. If you've read this far, thank you. Thank you for witnessing this, for holding this truth with me for a moment, for not looking away even when it got dark. Thank you for letting me be complicated, for not demanding I be purely good or purely evil, hero or villain. Thank you for understanding or trying to understand, or at least not immediately condemning. Thank you for being here, for being human with me in this messy, painful, beautiful, terrible experience of being alive and making choices and living with them. I think about the butterfly effect sometimes. How one choice ripples out into infinite consequences. If Marcus had never framed my mother, I would be a completely different person living a completely different life. If I'd never found those letters, I'd still believe the lie, still love my stepfather, still resent my mother. If I'd turned the evidence over to police instead of confronting him myself, he might be in prison now and I might be free of this weight. Every choice creates a new reality, and we're all living in the realities our choices created. This is mine. A reality where I know the truth, where I took revenge, where I live with secrets and lies and the knowledge that I'm capable of murder. It's not the reality I would have chosen if you'd asked me a year ago. But it's the reality I created, and I have to live in it now. My mother used to tell me, I learned this from her letters, that the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. She said you can only hate someone you once loved or still love. That hate is just love that's been wounded and warped and turned inside out. I understand that now. I loved Marcus deeply, and when I discovered what he'd done, that love transformed into something else, something just as powerful but destructive instead of nurturing. I loved him and I killed him, and somehow both actions came from the same place in my heart, the place that needed him to matter, to affect me, to be important enough to destroy. I loved my mother too, even though I never knew her, even though I spent 20 years believing she'd abandoned me. The love was always there, underneath the resentment, waiting to be acknowledged. When I read her letters, when I understood her sacrifice and her suffering, that love exploded inside me like a star, bright and consuming and powerful enough to fuel my revenge. I killed Marcus for her, but also for me, for the child I was who needed her mother, for the woman I am who needed justice, for the future I might have where I'm not carrying this wound anymore. But here's what I'm learning, slowly and painfully. Revenge doesn't heal wounds, just creates new ones. I killed Marcus and my mother is still dead. I cleared her name and I still grew up without her. I have the truth now, and it doesn't undo 20 years of lies. Justice, real justice, would have been her never going to prison in the first place. Justice would have been me growing up with my mother, Marcus in prison where he belonged, a life built on truth instead of deception. But that justice was never available to me. The world doesn't work that way. The world is messy and unfair, and by the time you understand what's been taken from you, it's too late to get it back. All you can do is make people pay for taking it. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes it has to be enough. I'm trying to build something good from the wreckage. Tyler and I are house hunting, looking for a place to start our family, somewhere with no ghosts, no memories of Marcus or the lies. I'm trying to be a good wife, a good friend, a good person despite what I've done. I volunteer at a women's shelter, working with domestic violence survivors, helping them escape situations like my mother was in, using my inherited rage for something constructive. I don't tell them my story, the real story, but they see something in me, a recognition of darkness, an understanding of what it means to be pushed too far. They trust me. I help them because I couldn't help my mother, because maybe if someone had helped her, she wouldn't have spent 20 years in prison, wouldn't have died alone believing her daughter hated her. The dreams haven't stopped. Some nights I dream about Marcus bleeding out, his eyes wide with shock and betrayal, reaching for me as if I might save him. Other nights I dream about my mother in prison, writing letter after letter that I never received, her hope slowly dying with each year of silence. The worst dreams are the ones where I'm 7 years old again and she's leaving, and I'm screaming for her to stay, and she's looking back at me with tears streaming down her face, and Marcus is standing beside me with his hand on my shoulder, holding me back, and I can't tell her that I know the truth now, that I understand, that I love her. I wake up from those dreams gasping, Tyler asking me what's wrong, and I lie again, say it's just stress, just anxiety, just nothing. Living with murder is strange. You'd think it would consume you, define every moment, but it doesn't. Most days are just normal. I go to work, I have lunch with friends, I laugh at stupid videos on social media. I argue with Tyler about what to watch on Netflix. I live. The murder is just there, underneath everything, a foundation stone in the architecture of my current life. It's always present but not always prominent. Sometimes I go hours without thinking about it, and then something will trigger the memory. A news story about a robbery, the smell of whiskey, the color of blood, and I'm back in that study, watching him die, feeling nothing. People talk about guilt like it's this overwhelming force that crushes you, makes you confess, drives you mad. But my guilt is quieter than that. It's not about killing Marcus, honestly, I still believe he deserved what he got. My guilt is about Tyler, about the life we're building on a foundation of lies. My guilt is about the women at the shelter who trust me, who see me as someone good and safe when I'm someone who took a life. My guilt is about my future children, who will grow up with a mother who's a murderer, even if they never know it. That's the guilt that keeps me up at night, not what I did to Marcus, but what I'm doing to everyone else by pretending to be someone I'm not. But isn't that what we all do? Pretend to be better than we are. Hide the worst parts of ourselves so people will love us. Marcus did it perfectly for decades, and I never suspected. Now I'm doing it too, performing normalcy, performing goodness, performing innocence. Maybe we're all just performing, all hiding something, all protecting ourselves from being truly seen. Maybe that's just being human. Or maybe I'm just rationalizing, justifying, doing exactly what Marcus did when he convinced himself that framing my mother was somehow justified. I don't know anymore. The lines are blurry. I found my mother's address from her last letter, the place she was living after she was released from prison. It's a small town 3 hours south of Charleston, right on the coast. I drove there last month, told Tyler I needed a weekend alone to clear my head. The address was a tiny apartment above a bait shop, the kind of place you live when you can't afford anything better, when you're just surviving, not living. I talked to the owner of the shop, an older man named Ray who remembered her. Rebecca was quiet, he said. Kept to herself mostly. Worked at the diner down the street, always paid her rent on time. She got sick a few years back, couldn't afford treatment. I tried to help but she was proud, didn't want charity. She died in that apartment upstairs. I found her. It was sad, real sad. She seemed like someone carrying a heavy weight, you know? Like she'd lived through something terrible and never quite recovered. I sat in my car outside that bait shop and cried for hours. My mother died alone in a tiny apartment above a bait shop, carrying the weight of a false conviction and a lost daughter, too proud to accept help, too broken to thrive. She was 47 years old. She should have had decades left. She should have had grandchildren, retirement, peace. Instead she had nothing, just survival and memories and letters I never received. Marcus took all of that from her. He took her life, not with the fire he framed her for, but slowly, year by year, destroying her future while building mine on the foundation of her suffering. That's when I knew, truly knew, that killing him was right. Not legal, not moral by society's standards, but right in the way that matters to me. He owed a debt that could only be paid in blood, and I collected it. My mother couldn't do it herself. She was too good, too broken, too destroyed by what he'd done. So I did it for her. I was her vengeance, her justice, her final act of love made real through my hands. That's how I live with it. That's how I sleep at night, most nights anyway. I tell myself I was her instrument, her weapon, her daughter finally doing what needed to be done. Diana calls me sometimes, checking in, making sure I'm okay. She's the only person who knows the truth, her and her brother, and they're both bound to me now through shared guilt and shared secrets. She tells me the case is cold, that the police have moved on, that I'm safe. She tells me my mother's exoneration is making waves, that there's talk of investigating other cases from that era, other wrongful convictions. She tells me I've done something good, that justice has been served in its own way. I want to believe her. Some days I do. Tyler found me crying in the bathroom last week. I'd been looking at pictures of my mother I'd found in the attic, young and beautiful and full of life, holding me as a baby, both of us smiling. He held me while I sobbed, asked me what was wrong, and I told him a partial truth, that I missed the mother I never got to know, that I was angry at Marcus for lying to me, that I felt robbed of something essential. He said all the right things, that I was allowed to grieve, that my feelings were valid, that he loved me. And I felt the lie between us like a physical thing, solid and immovable. I wanted to tell him. I almost told him. But I didn't, because I'm a coward, because I'm scared of losing him, because the truth would destroy us and I've already destroyed enough. We put an offer on a house yesterday. It's perfect, 3 bedrooms, big backyard, good school district. Tyler is so excited, talking about painting nurseries and teaching our kids to ride bikes and hosting family barbecues. I smile and nod and plan the future with him, and I don't tell him that every room in that house will be haunted for me, that I'll be playing house with a man who doesn't know who I really am, that our children will be raised by a mother with blood on her hands. But maybe that's okay. Maybe I can be a good mother despite what I've done. Maybe love can coexist with darkness. Maybe I can give my children the childhood I never had, the one Marcus stole from me, the one my mother dreamed about in her prison cell. I think about the concept of karma a lot now. If karma is real, what's coming for me? What's the universe going to take in exchange for the life I took? Will it be my marriage, my future children, my sanity, my safety? Or have I already paid with the 20 years I lost with my mother, with a childhood built on lies, with the weight I'll carry forever? I don't know. I don't believe in karma, not really, but I think about it anyway, waiting for the other shoe to drop, for consequences to catch up with me. The thing about secrets is they change you. Before I found those letters, I was a different person. I was happy, uncomplicated, trusting. I believed in good people and bad people, clear lines between right and wrong, justice systems that worked. I believed my life made sense, that my past was solid ground beneath my feet. Now I know better. Now I know the world is chaos barely held together by lies we agree to believe, that good people are capable of terrible things and terrible people can seem good, that justice is just a word we use to feel better about revenge, that nothing is solid, everything shifts, and the ground can disappear beneath you at any moment. I'm a different person than I was a year ago. Harder, colder, more capable of violence and lies. But also, strangely, more empathetic. I understand now what it means to be pushed beyond your limits, to have your reality shattered, to discover that everything you believed was wrong. I understand suffering in a way I never did before. I understand the women at the shelter when they talk about staying with abusers, about loving and hating the same person, about doing desperate things to survive or escape or find justice. I understand my mother now, her choices, her sacrifice, her love that survived 20 years of prison and loss. I understand Marcus too, which is the worst part, understanding that he wasn't a monster but a weak man who did monstrous things, that he probably even believed his own lies, that he loved me in his broken, selfish, destructive way. Understanding doesn't mean forgiving. I don't forgive him. I never will. But I understand him now, and that understanding is its own kind of burden. It would be easier if he were pure evil, if there were nothing human about him, nothing I could recognize or relate to. But he was human, flawed and fearful and desperate, and he made choices that destroyed lives including his own. And I made a choice too, the choice to kill him, and now I'm living with that, carrying it, trying to build something good despite it or maybe because of it. The letters are my most precious possession now. I keep them hidden but I know where they are at all times, conscious of their presence the way you're conscious of your heartbeat when you really pay attention. They're proof that I was loved, that my mother never stopped fighting for me, never stopped being my mother even when I didn't know she existed. They're also proof of Marcus's crime, evidence that should have freed my mother but didn't because he hid it so well. They're proof of my crime too, in a way the thing that drove me to murder, the catalyst for everything that followed. Sometimes I think about burning them, destroying the evidence, making it so this story only exists in my memory. But I can't. They're all I have of her, her voice, her love, her truth. My therapist asked me last week if I felt like I had closure about my mother. I said yes because that's what you're supposed to say, because closure is the goal, the end point, the thing that means you're healed and can move on. But it was a lie. There's no closure. There's just this, living with the truth, carrying the weight, trying to be better than the circumstances that shaped me. Closure suggests an ending, but this isn't ending. This is my life now, forever. I'm the daughter of a wrongfully convicted woman, and the killer of the man who framed her. I'm Tyler's wife and soon-to-be mother of his children. I'm a volunteer at a women's shelter and a murderer who got away with it. I'm all of these things at once, contradictory and complicated and unresolved. That's not closure. That's just reality. I wonder what my mother would think of what I did. Would she be proud that I avenged her? Horrified that I became violent? Sad that I threw away my clean conscience for her? Grateful that I finally knew the truth? I'll never know. I can imagine her voice from the letters, gentle and loving, telling me she understands, that she doesn't blame me, that she just wants me to be happy. But that might just be what I need to believe to live with myself. The truth is she's gone, and I'm projecting what I need onto her memory, making her absolve me because I can't absolve myself. There are moments, brief and strange, when I forget what I did. I'll be cooking dinner or driving to work or laughing with Tyler, and for a moment I'm just a normal person living a normal life, and then I remember, and it's like falling, like the ground disappearing beneath me. Killed someone. I planned it and executed it and covered it up successfully. That's who I am now. That's what I'm capable of. And I have to integrate that knowledge into my sense of self. Somehow be both the person who volunteers at shelters and the person who stabbed her stepfather to death. I have to contain both realities. Most days I manage. Some days I don't. The worst part isn't the guilt or the fear of being caught or even the lies I have to tell. The worst part is knowing that I'd do it again. If I could go back to that moment in the attic, finding those letters, knowing what Marcus had done, I'd make the same choice. I'd still confront him, still kill him, still cover it up. The circumstances would have to be exactly the same for exactly the same result. That's what terrifies me, not that I killed someone, but that I'm not sorry enough, that given the same situation I'd choose violence again. What does that make me? What does that say about who I am at my core? I'm trying to be good in other ways, as if that balances the scales. I'm kind to strangers. I donate to charity. I support my friends through their problems. I'm a good wife, attentive and loving and present. I work hard at my job. I follow traffic laws and pay my taxes and recycle and do all the small things that good citizens do. But none of that changes what I did. None of that makes me not a murderer. I'm just a murderer who also does good things. And I don't know if that's better or worse than being purely one thing or the other. Tyler's parents are coming to visit next month for Thanksgiving. They're good people, salt of the earth types who raised their son to be kind and honest and trusting. They loved Marcus, thought he was wonderful for raising me alone, used to thank him at family dinners for being such a good father to me. What will they think when they find out the truth about what he did to my mother? Will they believe it? Will they think I'm making it up, speaking ill of the dead? I'll have to show them the evidence, the letters, the trial records, all of it. I'll have to watch their image of Marcus shatter the way mine did. And I'll have to comfort them and pretend I found out after he died naturally. Pretend I'm not the reason he's dead. Pretend I'm innocent. The lies multiply. That's what I didn't understand at first, that one lie requires 10 more to support it, and those 10 require 100 more, until your whole life is a careful construction of falsehoods that you have to remember and maintain constantly. I understand now why Marcus kept the letters instead of destroying them. It's exhausting maintaining lies at that scale. Sometimes you need a piece of truth, even hidden truth, just to remember what really happened, just to have some small authentic thing in a life built on deception. If my children ever find out what I did, if someday decades from now this secret comes out, what will they think of me? Will they understand why I did it? Will they be horrified? Will they wonder what else I'm capable of? Will they look at their childhood differently, seeing darkness underneath every happy memory? Will they be able to love me still, or will the truth destroy their image of me the way the truth destroyed my image of Marcus? These are the questions that keep me awake at night, the fears that sit in my chest like stones. But here's the thing, I don't regret it. I wish I did. It would be easier if I could point to regret as evidence of my humanity. Proof that I'm not a monster. But I don't regret killing Marcus. I regret that it was necessary, regret that he did what he did, regret that my mother suffered, regret that I have to lie to Tyler and carry this weight forever. But the actual act of killing him, no regret. He deserved it. He destroyed lives and showed no remorse, and the world is better without him in it. That's my truth, however ugly it might be. I've been reading about wrongful convictions. Other cases where innocent people spent decades in prison while the real criminals walked free. There are thousands of them, thousands of people like my mother who lost everything to someone else's crime. Most of them never get exonerated. Most of them die in prison or die free but broken, never getting justice, never having their names cleared. My mother is one of the lucky ones in a horrible way. She got exonerated even if it was posthumous, even if it came too late to save her. That's more than most wrongfully convicted people ever get. And it only happened because I found those letters, because Marcus made that one mistake. Justice is random and rare. That's why I had to take it into my own hands. Would I recommend what I did to others? Absolutely not. Murder is permanent and irreversible and carries consequences far beyond the act itself. The legal system exists for a reason, even when it fails, because vigilante justice leads to chaos. I know this intellectually. But emotionally, viscerally, I can't regret what I did. I can't say it was wrong when it felt so necessary, when the alternative was letting him live his comfortable retirement while my mother was dead and forgotten. Sometimes the system fails so completely that the only justice available is the justice you take. That's not a moral statement, just an observation about reality. So here I am, almost a year later, living with what I've done, trying to build a future on this foundation. Tyler just called. He's on his way home, wants to celebrate the house offer being accepted. I'll paste on a smile, pop champagne, toast to our future, play the role of excited wife and future mother. And part of it won't be playing, part of it will be real. I'm excited about our future. I do love him. I do want to build a life with him. The murder doesn't erase that. It just complicates it, adds shadows to what could have been simple and pure. I'm learning to live in the contradiction, to be multiple things at once, to accept that I'm not one simple thing but a collection of choices and consequences and competing truths. I'm a victim and a perpetrator. I'm a loving wife and a liar. I'm someone who volunteers to help vulnerable women and someone who committed premeditated murder. I'm my mother's daughter, carrying her love and her suffering forward. I'm Marcus's victim, shaped by his lies and his crimes. I'm my own person, making my own choices, living with my own consequences. I'm all of these things, and I'm learning that that's okay, that being human means containing multitudes, even when those multitudes contradict each other. This is my confession, my truth, my story. I killed my stepfather for framing my mother and stealing 20 years of both our lives. I don't regret it. Do it again. And I'm going to live the rest of my life with this secret, building something good on top of something dark, trying to be better than my worst moment while never forgetting what I'm capable of. That's the person I am now. That's who I became the moment I found those letters in the attic. And I'm still figuring out how to live with her, how to integrate her into my sense of self, how to move forward when I can't undo what's been done. So tell me, and I mean this genuinely, if you discovered that someone you loved and trusted had destroyed an innocent person's life and stolen years from both of you, what would you have done? Would you have trusted the system that already failed once? Would you have been able to live with letting them walk free, retire comfortably, never face real consequences for their crimes? And if you'd made the same choice I did, if you'd taken justice into your own hands, would you be able to live with it the way I'm trying to? Or would the guilt consume you in ways it hasn't consumed me? I'm asking because I genuinely don't know if my reaction is normal, if my lack of regret makes me a monster, or if anyone in my situation would feel the same way. Have you ever been pushed so far that you discovered you were capable of things you never imagined? Have you ever had to choose between two impossible options and then live forever with whichever one you chose?